Anyway, thank you for having me here. I've been at this for 10 years, basically talking about sexuality and gender and whatnot. Not just through a Catholic lens, but through a Catholic lens, a lens that's growing in understanding, because that's coming through my journey, which involves a lot of growing and a lot of understanding. And there's still lots of room to grow for me, and I think that's a sign that I'm still alive, so that's a good thing. Anyway, so as we know, it's about my identity in Christ. This is what the talk's about. And anything that is good here, let's just point that glory to God here, because this is what it's about. First thing to do with identity, though, I'd just like to challenge you to think about, like, what is in a name? Like, what's in a sense of identity? For example, maybe you remember when you were younger, somebody getting called a loser, right? Or maybe somebody gets taught to believe they're a winner. Or maybe in the Christian context, someone's like, well, you're a missionary, right? Or you're a charismatic, or you're a traditionalist, right? Or you're an athlete. And all these types of identity labels of some sort, once we take them on, there's sort of an ethos that can emerge from our spirit based on the degree to which we believe that is who we are, okay? Or maybe you're a teacher, right? And so, like, becoming the world's greatest teacher is what you, like, build your life to be about, right? And so how we see ourselves in many respects, I mean, there's truisms, there's truth underneath those types of labels sometimes, like in what we do and whatnot, but it impacts how we carry ourselves, what we think we ought to do. In fact, your perception of your journey towards fulfillment and what that might look like, that's going to be influenced by that as well. And of course, that's even more so once a type of mindset or identity is not just used to describe yourself, but also used to define yourself. And the more we come to define ourselves in a particular way, the more our journey towards fulfillment is influenced by our perspective of what that means. Okay, that's a lot of high-end thinking for me anyway, after sleeping in a car last night in a lightning storm, but we're going to go more into a personal testimony a little bit about this and how I was able to navigate this Catholic perspective on the personal level. And through this, I'm hoping that there will be nuggets, let's say, that you can use to help others come to find their place in the Catholic Church. Because, quite frankly, the Catholic Church is the last place the world said I should ever look to find belonging, let alone purpose or mission, right? And so I feel blessed beyond all measure to know that I do belong in the Catholic Church, and the church is a place for me and anyone who has a shared experience with mine. And so what is that experience? Well, I thought you'd never ask. Part of my story is that same-sex attractions and transgender inclinations, or what they be called today, are part of my story, right? And so the world, through my entire life, has always said, first part is you don't belong here. Your real mission belongs in actually attacking the church, okay? So something happened, right? That I'm not attacking the church and I'm here to defend the church. And not just to defend the church, but to try to show people that the church provides something more beautiful. The church provides something more beautiful. That's where I'm at. So what happened? Well, the short story is that I moved to northern Alberta, right? Just up the road towards Peace River. And I met some great people. They taught me how to pray again. And they showed me an example of, like, love and charity and just something more beautiful. And I was like, that's it, I'm in. And that's kind of the end of my testimony. So there you go, yeah. Just kidding. There's a few details, right, But those people, they imprinted upon me right at the very beginning that the real way to someone's heart, as much as sometimes I wish I could just pound them on the head with a catechism or something, the real way to the person's heart is through love, through providing something more beautiful, through providing beautiful relationship. But how do we get to beautiful relationship? We have to enter into relationship with Jesus Christ more beautifully ourselves, right? Now, of course, the speakers this weekend and Mass and everything has been pointing us towards that. And we're just going to hope that for your entire lives, you actually continue on that trajectory of entering more deeply into a relationship with Jesus Christ so that his love can radiate through you more intently to the whole world at your fingertips, your circle of influence. Because that circle of influence took someone like me who was teetering on the edge of where do I belong, and I ought to be attacking the church, and there was a point in time where I was rejecting the church because I was misled about what the church actually taught. We'll get into that. But my heart had become softened, and that's really part of the big punchline. So, again, part of my story, my earliest memories, I thought maybe I should have been born a girl, and I just remember not fitting in as a boy. That was my perception. That's an important detail because the perception of the child actually matters more to how they develop in their life than the parent's perception of how their kid is doing. Okay, so I know that I've talked to my parents about this stuff since then. I mean, it's been 40 years, so I had a chance or two. But what they understand is we talked about it, is like they thought everything was fine, but they didn't understand that I had these wrestlings in my heart. But a little kid can't be tasked with the responsibility of coming up with the language to describe these complex feelings, right? It's not reasonable to expect that a little child could articulate this kind of stuff. But anyway, there I was, feeling, let's say, at a distance from the boys. We would play together, but I felt like I was over here and they were over there. In fact, I began to kind of like see myself as the other. There was times when we'd play successfully together and everything, but I still didn't feel like I belonged in that wolf pack, so to speak. Wolf pack of guys, my same-sex peers. And this is alongside of wondering about whether I was supposed to be a girl. And this kind of went on, but I just went and lived my only life that I knew how to live because I'd only had one life, the only life I had. So I didn't know any different. I do thank God that I wasn't, let's say, in today's society where at that age some maniac would have scooped me up and said, this means that. The fact that you don't feel comfortable in your sense of self as a boy equals you're transgender. The fact that you question yourself about whether you measure up to the other boys means you were meant to be a girl. Or the fact that you desire to be around other guys in a way that might be reminiscent of friendship equals you're gay. Okay, those are the types of messages that are getting out to people right now. I had a interior pining and a desire for friendship. In fact, check this out. This isn't my story, but somebody I know, he was in his 60s, and he told me, he's like, after looking at this whole situation of living my whole life as a gay man, I realized that all I was looking for was friendship. I was like, wow. Thank God that he realized that then, and he was able to begin that. But it was a similar thing for me. I had this thirst for friendship, but I perceived that I struggled to bond with guys as I was growing up. So there was this chasm that kept widening. And the more there was them over there and there was me over here. And imagine what that does to the self-concept or the identity of someone who's trying to survive in elementary school. Elementary school is like, it's like Lord of the Flies sometimes, or you're trying to survive, okay? So my identity, my sense of identity, because of course God created me as a man, I get that now. But my sense of identity at the time was entirely built on how I connected relationally to these other people. I needed to fit, but how did I fit? That was the real question. Grade 6 rolls along, and this is around at the time when the other peers in my class started noticing, I started noticing that they started noticing the girls. And I could tell that they were kind of vying for the affection of certain girls, and that's all nice and cute. But then I look back now and I see, I was still like vying for the affection of the boys. I was still thirsty for the approval of the boys. And so my real question was, first of all, how do I manage this extra pain of feeling like I'm left behind? That was another big one. But now, how do I belong with these boys? They're interested in the girls. Somehow my 11-year-old mind began to wonder, maybe I belong with them like as a boyfriend. Maybe I'd feel accepted if it was in that kind of way. It wasn't a conclusion, but it was definitely something I pondered. And that sort of thing, that consumed some brain energy. It really got me thinking about where do I fit in? Of course, I was nowhere near thinking about my identity in Christ. It was not part of my thought matrix at that point in time, even though I was raised in a Catholic family, that went to church on Sundays and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, I was trying to find out where I belonged. And so, grade 6 passes, things don't really change. I keep going. I'm just floating above survival mode here in terms of how do I fit in. Well, then suddenly I enter the realm of, let's say, unchaste activity with girls, because I was trying to find where I belonged. But alongside this, I had a coworker group that was quick to give me some high fives whenever I would engage in that sort of activity. And so suddenly I was getting affirmation. I hadn't had affirmation as a boy that I perceived before. And so this was like hugely impactful for me. I was getting fed affirmations and senses of validation in ways that I'd never had before. And so it just drove me to continue into that type of behavioral patterns. And not only did I hurt others in that, I also injured myself, hurt myself through that, just like spiritually. You're spiritually bonding and breaking in ways that are far removed from the idea of the beauty and richness that could emerge in a holy marriage. So I wasn't thinking that way. I didn't have that at the forefront of my mind. I was floating in sort of a survival mode. What happened shortly after that in my teens, just to add some, spice to life, was I got molested by a guy, in my teens. And I had a physiological reaction. And the thing that's going through my mind at this time is, oh my God, this means that, what else is a teenager going to think when they have a physiological reaction down there? I hadn't gone through all the thoughts about what's really happening. So it was responsive, it was reactionary, and again, put me into this survival mode thing. Like, I don't want this, It just was. The question about being a girl or, like feeling like I didn't belong in the boys, it just was. I never struggled with it. I just didn't want it, but I wanted to escape it. And so, lo and behold, this was also right around the time when I was exposed to online pornography. And then that was an escapism method like no other, I am sad to say. But interestingly, that time getting molested by the guy was actually the second time I came out. So you hear people saying like, oh, I knew since I was little. Well, I was 11 years old the first time I came out to myself. And it's because by age 11, I had already been exposed to pornography for 2 years. And after 2 years of using pornography and hiding in shame of trying to sneak around, I just wasn't getting the high anymore. It behaves like a drug on your brain. I wasn't getting high on what I was looking at. The ladies on the pages of the Walmart flyers wasn't doing it for me anymore. So my conclusion as an 11-year-old with an 11-year-old brain was that this means I'm gay, okay? But then I had to live with that thought as a wondering maybe this is what it means, right? So here's the thing, okay? So I was observing what was going on and drawing conclusions, but I don't think my conclusions were accurate. I'm gonna give you an example of how I knew this in my own life. Okay, I was walking with my dad. I love my dad. We're in a small town and there's a train car in the distance, right? And I'm like, I was small, okay? And there's like, Dad, let's go over to the train car. I'm gonna go push it, right? Thinking it looks like a little toy, right? Right in the distance, it was small, right? Listen, I squished your train car, right? And so we get there. The wheel of the train car is as tall as my head or a little higher. And instead of thinking to myself like, oh, well, rationally speaking, I probably cannot push this train car because it weighs more than me and is very large. Instead, my young brain developed to an age-appropriate level of development, still decided, I'm going to push this thing. And it didn't move. But what I look back now and I see how obvious it is that a young child will have, let's say, rational conclusions that are tempered to the degree of their developmental level. In plain speak, I was a kid. I had kid thoughts, and I couldn't rationalize things in a way that would be reflective of the truth that would be needed in order to respect the honesty of creation. Getting philosophical here. So I came to these conclusions about myself. The girls on the page aren't attractive to me right now. This equals gay. That was it. And so I was escaping this, running this, online porn. I'm in my teens now and going into my 20s, and all I'm trying to do is escape. And I'm feeling shameful. I'm hating myself. I got really poor self-control on all this kind of stuff. And I'm getting into my 20s, and I basically burn out. Like, I burn out of running. Like, you want a good workout plan? Try outrunning God. Try outrunning God's call for you to be honest with yourself, okay? Like look at this. Come on. I'm 43. I'm feeling fine. 42. Feeling fine. I was running from God for a lot of years. So there's my mid-20s. And I finally burn out. But, the beautiful thing is that God uses everything, right? He even uses this. In fact, by the time I'd finally come out to myself again and be like, okay, gay is who I am, and this is before trans was mainstream, maybe I should pursue a relationship to just because this is who I am, this is the best it'll ever be. I had already been so exhausted from relationships or relational pursuits that I just didn't have any gas in the tank to go to do it. So the way God uses things is great. So I didn't actually go the distance and try anything. But deep down in my heart, I still had all of the wounds that I had as a child that said, you don't measure up to the boys. You don't fit as a boy. Maybe you should have been a girl. Remember that time you got molested and you had a body reaction? Remember that time you looked at pornography and you weren't getting high anymore? All those things were still there. They weren't addressed. So there I am in my mid-20s now, again, trying to figure out, where do I belong? So like I said, I moved way up north around the Peace River area, actually with one of my first big jobs. And this is now mid-late 20s. And I go to church. Well, that was a good sign. I kind of had a little bit of a pre-conversion before that, which was awesome, because God is awesome. So I go to church, 7 people in church, beautiful, beautiful place. But Father was there, Father Joseph, you might know him. And he preached that day like there was 10,000 people in the audience. Like he could have been a World Youth Day kind of thing, And one of the things he brought up in his homily was that there's more to know. There's simply more to know. He didn't say this is right and that's wrong and blah, blah, blah. Nothing like that. He just said there's more for us to know about this kind of stuff. And so I was thirsty to try to find ways where I could be like, I don't want this. I want to find reasons where I can express how I don't want these feelings. And so I was like, wait a second, this is like a window of hope. I can go online maybe and learn stuff, and then I'll be like, hey, now I've got some words and thoughts. And here's what I learned online back in 2007-ish. What I learned real quickly was that every single thing that I found, 99%, okay, was to do with this. If you have this feeling, then it does equal that you are gay. This is it. If you feel this, then this is who you are. Wholesale, that was kind of the mission statement of the world. But I'm a total math nerd, and I don't know if there's any math nerds. I don't have to put your hand up. I know there's reason for shame. Okay, I'm just kidding. So I'm a math nerd. That's right. But I was like, okay, so something that is can't be the same as something that it's not, logically, 4 does not equal 5. Something that is not chosen can't be considered non-distinct from something that's chosen. For example, I didn't choose attractions. Nobody just, chooses, I'm going to experience this today. So it has to be considered distinct from how I choose to self-identify and how I take on, my thought space of who I am as a person. So I remember bringing that to some YouTube videos. I'm like, well, I'll tell the world this beautiful news that I realized that I can be honest with myself about the existence of an attraction while not taking on this identity that I have to be gay, because I don't want to be gay. And I can take this news of this petite distinction. So to the world. And I took it to some YouTube chats and stuff back in the day when you could actually chat on YouTube with a messenger, and some comments. And people lost their minds with this stuff. And I was like, what is going on? Why is there such a hatred of this idea that someone can take on a mindset that says, I don't have to put myself in this gay box in order to be honest with myself? I couldn't believe it. It really shocked me. What shocked me even worse was realizing there was a lot of Catholics who also wanted me to stay in this gay box of identity, and they could not handle that I could see myself differently. Perhaps, I don't know, like a beloved child of God, first and foremost. No, no, no. No, no, no. For a lot of people, it was, oh, this is who you are. This is who you'll always be. This is the best you'll ever expect to get. You drew the short straw. God kind of screwed you over. This is how it is. Actually, they would say, you've been especially gifted in this way. And it's just like a bunch of stuff that didn't make sense. It came back to that thing of like, I didn't choose the attraction, but I can choose how I see myself, and I choose to reject that idea. Because I didn't want that. That was part of my story. And yeah, like some people did not like that. So I'm going through that learning, and I was going through a lot of these intellectual ways of exploring the meaning of identity. Now, of course, I love food, right? Even though I was outrunning God, I needed energy to do that. So no joke, it was like a weekend night, and I was looking at a McDonald's hamburger. I'm off of those, finally. Anyway, and I was thinking to myself, okay, so this whole idea of like, who am I? Gay, straight, whatever. That's like our sexuality is a facet of who we are. It's like, if this burger could talk, here I'm imagining a talking hamburger. If this burger could talk and it said to me, I'm pickle, or I'm gluten, or I'm meat, as if there's any meat, okay, that wouldn't be enough. It wouldn't be enough to encompass the wholeness and beauty of that hamburger, right? It wouldn't be enough. Okay, so I realized with that if I wanted to be honest with myself about the greatest truth of who I am in terms of identity, I couldn't just take some facet of me and say this is who I am, logically speaking. I couldn't say I am a teacher. I mean, it's true that that's part of my human story, but it's not who I am. It's less than who I am. I couldn't just say I am straight, or I am gay, or I am trans, or I am whatever. Those are subsets. Those are things that are related to subsets of the human experience, or the part of our story. And I was like, well, you know what? I've lived a lie my whole life, so I don't want to buy someone else's lie and continue to accept things that are less than fully true. So to heck with that, I'm going to let go of those types of identities. And I have a rational reason for doing so. They simply reflect less than who I am in the eyes of God. So it's very easy for me as a math nerd to just let go of that. I didn't have any other attachments to that. The other thing that happened was another Friday night, thinking about food, and I'm looking at this box of macaroni and cheese. Macaroni and cheese. And I thought to myself, why does it say mac and cheese, but not cheese and mac? Because it used to say cheese and mac. About 15 years ago, it was Kraft, cheese, and macaroni. And then suddenly, if you can believe it, the courts got involved and they changed it to mac and cheese. Why? Well, what's there more of? There's more macaroni than cheese. Get what I'm saying here? So much so that they had to do this in the court of law, okay? So I'm thinking, well, if this organization of ingredients matters for the things I put into my body, being my math nerdy self, if the ingredients matter for what I put into my body, then the ingredients of my body should also follow the same logic. So what are the so-called ingredients of me? I thought to myself, am I a sexuality with the person, or am I a person with the sexuality? And that was like a mic drop moment in my life back then when I was exploring my sense of identity. It was like, well, I'm a person with a sexuality. That's the proper order of my ingredients. So even if I wanted to be perfectly honest with myself, the first thing I need to do is drop these identities that say I'm gay or I'm straight and so on, because all those things are undoing that order. I love order. I love math and I love order. And quite frankly, I love math because that's the language of God. All the math people know what I'm talking about. Okay. See? So these are things I'm exploring this thing with identity. But this is me putting on a mask because I was still too afraid to let my heart become exposed, okay? I had a wounded heart underneath this, and so I actually hid in mathematics as a way to, let's say, find stability. Because in math, you have a predictable pursuit, and that is truth. So I needed to transition from that in order to allow Jesus to really enter my heart. I had put walls up because I wanted to seem like I had my act together. I wanted to seem like I wasn't a complete disaster interiorly. But newsflash, I kind of was. Okay. So fast forward to 2008, summer. I'm feeling pretty cocky with my math logic stuff. And I'm going to this conference called a Courage Conference. And Courage is an organization where people who experience same-sex attractions, and who desire to live according to the teachings of the church, which are proposed, not imposed, by the way. Write that down. I see you've got a notebook. Proposed, not imposed. And so I went down there, and my first conference with people, and I saw myself as I'm not like this. Like some of these people, they have left the gay life. I never did that. I never went down that road physically. But I didn't realize at the time that my heart was wounded in the same ways as many of these people who I've come to know and have developed great friends with, even to this day. Short story, there's adoration, midnight adoration. If any one of you are signed up for midnight adoration, look out. Jesus might come to you in a unique way if you open your heart to him, okay? So there I am praying, and across the aisle, maybe it's 3 a.m., there's this missionary, a Focus missionary. I found it out later, okay? So she's praying, Jesus is at the front, and I'm at the back thinking, well, I'm still struggling with the idea that God could love me. God's over there at the front, and, I'm comfortably at the back. And there she is over there. I take a look, and there's some kind of radiance emanating from her being. And in my heart, I knew immediately that was the light of Christ coming from her heart outward. Not like a sunbeam, but just like a radiance I'd never seen. It was like spiritual eyes had been opened. God had allowed me to see that. And in that moment, that was the first time I really realized that Jesus isn't just hidden away on that altar. Yes, he's hidden away sometimes, but he comes to us. That was a thing. And I was like, Jesus, would you come into my heart too? Please, I'm so broken. I've had to harden up for so long. I can't do this forever. And I invited Jesus, after seeing his radiance in there and realizing that he can come to us, that's the first time I invited Jesus Christ into my heart as an adult. So, and here's what happened. Okay, so immediately, boom, he just, poof, came in and just, I was completely encased in his love. I don't know how to describe it. And I took my backpack and I bundled it up on the pew, and then I just laid down. And it felt like the hand of God, the Father, was just caressing my soul. And all the wounds and all the holes and all the pain was just being filled up with his love, Like when you're paving over your bread with peanut butter, it's it's nice and smooth. Yeah, and I just relished that, and I stayed there. I stayed there for I don't know. I have no idea, maybe an hour, I don't know. Long time. But that was a life changer because I knew that God's love was for me. So not only did I see the truth of my identity being first and foremost logically connected to my relationship to God the Father and being able to, God the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, but being able to depart from these ideas that, hey, guess what, gay is all you'll ever be. And I was able to enter into the realm of accepting God's love, And that was big for me because I had struggled to accept love. There's other reasons for that, but that's another conference. Okay. So these things are happening for me, and my heart is being impacted. Around the same time, I ended up going to a conference. So I was going up there to teach. It was my first teaching gig. I go to this conference for teachers. And I'm still navigating this, and I'm just trying to live rightly at this point. I've withdrawn from the wild hookup culture by then for years, okay? Just trying to live rightly day by day, have impacted beautifully by these lovely people who are probably people striving to love God just like you, okay? And then at this conference, just to show you how God can use everything and everybody, this super mega gay activist, the kind of guy that writes policy for the federal government, the kind of guy that gets these people thrown in jail if they don't want to call their boy a little girl, that guy, that's to the camera in case he's watching. He tells me environment plays a factor in the development of your attractions. First of all, that'd be against the law if he was to say it today, against his own law that he created. But I thought about that. That seared into my soul immediately. I'm like, environment. And this is after he just brainwashed a whole load of teachers at a conference, okay? So I chatted with him after, and this is one of the things that came out. But it really got me thinking, environment, maybe I should think about my environment. What are some of the things that impacted, how I am, right? And so over time and praying about this for a while, there's several things that popped up, but here are some of the most prominent ones. Number one, I always played with my brother. I love my brother, okay? We always played together. He was 3 years older than me and 3 years stronger than me. And so when we're little, when you're 6 and 3, that makes a difference. Guess who won the games, right? Okay, well, we did a lot of things that I associated to be boy things. So I got my clock cleaned when we played boy things. So I developed with my underdeveloped, my development appropriate from age level, I developed this idea that I wasn't good at boy things. I'm not good at being a boy. It was just loud and clear, and then I was able to see this echo through the years. My sense of being a boy was connected to my relation with my brother and how I always failed. I've never met a man of any age who loves being in the environment where they feel like they're a failure. And so it's no shock to me that I started to push away boy things. It's very obvious. I did totally gravitate towards the girl things, relating to girls in other ways, because it just hurt too much to feel like I was inadequate. Of course, this is all going through my mind, and I'm just not talking about this because I was just a little kid trying to live the only life I knew. This is adult eyes looking back at a kid situation. Another thing that happened in my environment was being exposed to porn when I was 9, like I mentioned. Okay, well, what happened after that? Oh, I know. I felt totally ashamed by having lack of self-control. All I was trying to do is recreate that high, trying to chase that dragon, trying to get that high again. But also recognizing that I lacked the self-control and feeling very ashamed about that. So let's sprinkle a little shame in there. So that shame brought about isolation. That isolation did not really help me make positive steps to go integrate myself into the lives of my peers. And you see this thing going and going and going. Oh, let's add a scary movie in grade 3 where I snuggled into the chest of a friend of mine, a male friend, and found safety. So now you add finding safety in the arms of a man. You start thinking about how this could impact a person's sense of identity as they're going forward. All thanks to this gay activist who challenged me with this idea that blows apart the idea that a person's born that way, by the way. There's a ton of activists who don't buy into that. It's amazing. I think there's more Catholics who believe that than there are gay activists, actually. Not trying to be salty, I'm just trying to lay the facts out, okay? So I knew that this environment thing was something I couldn't run away from. I had to look at things. But then some things started happening in real time as an adult. I was looking at in the now. And so this actually has to do with encountering none other than Taylor Swift. Now, I don't think you came to church thinking you'd hear about Taylor Swift, but we can pray for her in our hearts, right? Here's what happened. Taylor Swift comes on the radio, and my cousin, this is the beginning of her career, and, it's country songs about breakups, And my cousin's like, hey, Taylor, maybe it's you, right? And so like, she's the reason for the breakups, you know what I mean? And so I looked at, we both kind of laughed at that. And interiorly, I thought to myself, yeah, you know, I've been going through breakups like crazy. I've been dating girls and just breakup. Maybe it's me. Maybe I should look in the mirror a little bit and see about this here. And so that got me thinking about my conduct in that moment in real time. Another thing that happened was right around then, Facebook was kind of new. And somebody says to me, hey, on your Facebook friends list, it's just like 90% girls, like, what's up? And of course, I thought it was because I was such a catch. I was too pride-filled to realize that there might have been an issue. A couple weeks later, I go and I kind of check, and I'm like, I wonder what's going on here. And the guy was right. He was right. But I'd noticed something. Of the males on my Facebook list, except for just a small number, they were all people that I had met and had developed relationship with before I was molested by that guy in my teens. So I was like, wow, it's been basically since then that I have repelled myself. I've repelled myself from being around men. I've been incapable of developing a healthy relationship with men for a long time. I've got to look into that. That's not okay. In fact, you might say my relational appetite was radically impacted by that trauma. Okay, write that down. Relational appetite, radically impacted by the trauma. Another thing happened right around the same time is I went in for a hug, you know, a safe situation like around here, you know, you give a hug and stuff like that. It was like the first hug I'd given in ages. And I went in for it because it was the right thing to do. But I realized I didn't really know how to hug another guy. Like I could hug my dad and my brother because I knew them, but I didn't know how to hug another guy. And I'm like, man, like this should be so easy. Like, why can't I do this? So even though I was still wobbly in my faith, I knew that I had to look inside and see what was going on. The Lord actually did provide a beautiful hug to me. I want to tell you, this is so amazing. I was dying in fear of how it was hitting rock bottom. Oh, and not only rock bottom, a rock bottom after that, and another one after that in this cycle. And it was the night before my very first flight. I was going to fly to Quebec. And that's an irrelevant detail. Anyway, I was going to fly to Quebec, okay, before my first flight. And my brother was going to be taking me to the airport. And I was like, I'm going to die on this flight. That's what everyone thinks before their first flight, right? You're going to die. This is it. So I was convinced that I was going to die. I needed to become clean before everything, right? And so what happens is I didn't tell him about like my wanderings through sexuality. I started opening up to him about how I longed to be loved and how my heart was so wounded of feeling that I was unloved and unworthy of being loved. And so I'm telling you now, while I'm in good order, but at that point, it took me 2 hours to muster that out, while my brother pulled me close while we stood in the kitchen, and he held me, and he held me tight, and he held me up too, while I wept, and I wept, and I wept. And it was like the Lord allowed his love to flow through my brother to remind me in that special area of woundedness that I was loved. Indeed, I was loved. And that was about 16 years ago, and we've never talked since. Just kidding. We're good. So the Lord sprinkled these opportunities to know his love all throughout things. And once, like at first I intellectualized it, and then I came to like surrender my heart and learn the importance of surrendering my heart. And then it was like, how do I make sense of this church stuff, right? Because I got the relationship with Jesus going now, I think. I mean, always could be better, right? Because like these people, what I met, they were talking like funny words like chastity. And I didn't really know what that meant. Like as far as I knew, that just equaled no sex. It was abstinence, maybe? Or chaste or chastity. Like didn't even know how to speak this stuff. And so what I knew though from them is that they emitted a joy, they radiated a joy so beautiful that I just wanted what they were doing. And like I said, they taught me how to pray again. They showed me a better way through living the joy of the gospels of Christ. And learning about these virtues, so chastity is a virtue, was a part of that. But here was a problem that I learned, which was a tough one, was that I was still stuck in secular use of language. I didn't understand that the church kind of has its own language, okay? You know those songs where everyone gets the lyrics wrong, you know? I'm not about to pick one and date myself. Okay, maybe, no, okay. You know those songs where, you know, someone gets the lyrics wrong and you say, well, if those are the lyrics, the song doesn't make any sense. You know, and furthermore, if you were singing a song and you didn't know the lyrics, you couldn't possibly understand what the song was truly about in its fullest sense. Any of us. Would you agree? 2 blinks for yes. Okay, all right, good. So you know what I'm saying? There's a language to the church, and it was like, if I want to try to be authentic in my pursuit of truth and pursuit of self-honesty, which we're merging, by the way, because of math, if I want to be authentic to this pursuit of truth and pursuit of self-honesty, I need to start examining the language of the church so I can understand what it means. Because I certainly can't reject tenets of the church if I don't even know what the church is speaking. And that's what I noticed a lot of people who are, they were saying, like, you can't do that, or the church hates you. I'm like, well, what do you know about the church? And then they'd spout off a bunch of nonsense that they developed from, I don't know, like mainstream news, a lot of silly things like that. And so there is a language, and things like, even words like, let's say, marriage or sin or virtue, those are words that we're using the same word, but it has a wildly different meaning in the church. Now, I'm just going to talk about this chastity thing, of course. So I had to start learning the faith through the lens of virtue and understanding that this is really about the heart of surrender instead of just doing Catholic-looking things. And think about this axiom of order, not just for the math people. If you pursue a virtuous heart, a heart for Jesus. Okay, let's do it the other way around. If you merely try to do Catholic-looking behaviors, and I was getting good at those, you could do Catholic-looking behaviors. That doesn't necessarily imply that you will develop a virtuous heart. But if you are intentional about developing a heart of virtue for Jesus, it will necessitate that there will be Catholic-looking behaviors that emerge from that. It's like it's a one-way highway, right? And it helped realize that if I want to be honest about the order of things, if I want to truly love God, I have to put the pursuit of virtue above the pursuit of behaving right. And God knows there's enough people who sometimes even utilize the mechanics of the church to behave good but do not good things. So you could do Catholic-looking things without a heart of virtue, right? So I dove into this, understanding what chastity meant, and then it was like, well, what does it mean? And so I already learned that I want to uphold and honor truth because that's the language of God, and if I love the artist, I'm going to love his artwork and honor and respect it without being resentful. And I'm going to have to do that sexually, in the sexual realm as well. And what does that mean? Well, you find that in Catechism 2337, it talks about chastity, and it talks about successful integration. Chastity points to the successful integration of our sexuality. I might not have used the exact correct wording there, but successful integration. And it was like, if I truly do surrender to the church as the spotless bride of Christ, Catechism 789 and 796. If I go there and I trust the wisdom of the church above myself, seems to be a logical, good thing to do, then what does successful integration mean? Well, it means if I love the church, if I love Jesus Christ and I love the spotless bride of Christ, which is the mystical church, then I will willingly surrender my gift of sexuality to God's plan of what that is. And part of successful integration, for me as a male, is to not only accept that my physiological complement is a female, but also to accept the fact that God authored me as a male. So even if I wanted to hold on to the mindset that I am gay or something like that, it would be completely self-defeating because, first of all, that statement, I am, like there carries a lot of weight in that, right? And I've already come to the conclusion that I didn't need to hold on to that. But all of those things were pointing me towards a pursuit of fulfillment that took me away from the surrendering to Christ and instead brought me towards adhering to my own understanding, which was that I was the arbiter of what is and what is not sin, what is good and what is evil. And I couldn't do that. I already knew enough about my weaknesses to know that I had to surrender to the church. Not only had to, I desired to, and I was experiencing the love and joy from that. And so it was very easy for me to let go of the idea that maybe my pursuit of fulfillment ought to include a romantic pursuit with a same-sex partner. It was very easy to let that go. Why? Because the wisdom of the church points me to successful integration. It was very easy for me to let go of the idea that I'd somehow be ultimately happy if I went through a transition. Why? Because the church proposes the successful integration of my sexuality as a male. So what came before the walking away from the mindsets that being gay or trans is who I am was an increased trust in the church. And that increased trust in the church came because of like I said, Jesus made himself known to me, right? But there was also many logical things that I had gone through to get there that pointed to the idea that, wow, like every time I pursue truth, I end up with a pile of Catholic teaching. So maybe I should just trust the church more than I do. So where does that leave me? Well, the pursuit of virtue, you understand virtue correctly, it's not about just doing things, it's about striving to grow in excellence, to be maximally efficient in the gift of yourself, authored by God as the love note to humanity. Okay? I hope someone wrote that down. I don't think I remember what I said. I blacked out. Anyway, so we're growing in excellence. We're growing in excellence and discipline and all that stuff. And lo and behold, as a result of that, started to gain a little confidence. I gained some confidence out of that I was a man who could actually be successful at doing things that a man ought to do, like do things that are difficult, like self-denial, like practicing discipline. And as a result of that confidence, not only was I able to continue to pursue the virtue of chastity, for example, but I also became less afraid of being a man myself because I felt more capable, because I was able to do difficult things. And I was able to remap what my vision of manhood and femaleness was all about. It was about maximally serving the Lord as he authored, not according to some appetite, a particular appetite, right? Not according to a relational appetite that might have gotten twisted up because of some experience, which of course is what that gay activist told me pointed me towards. So I became less afraid of being a man. Part of that also helped me realize I didn't need to get from men what I thought I lacked. And as a result, lo and behold, in my case, the same-sex romantic attractions, the romanticization of finding a man to help me make up for what I felt I was missing, those diminished. And not that happens for everybody, but it happens for some, and it happened for me. So the same-sex sexual romantic attractions went down, and I also became less afraid of being a man because I was starting to understand myself through the lens of God as a beloved child of God, and restoring that vision of self in who I am. And so the transgender inclinations had diminished. In fact, it was about 6 months after I realized, like, I'd been well on the road of like being around good, holy men, almost like in a sense of surrogate fatherhood too. That's what a men's community can be. And all of these things pointed to realizing that life, that box that so many people said I could never leave, that box I could flick away and never look back. And so that's kind of where I've been. And just plowing forward, just trying to love the Lord and try to just be honest with where I'm at. And just trying to glorify him by pointing people to the reality that the church proposes her beautiful teachings for everybody so they can step out of what they know, and instead of being locked in any box, be open to what God could author in their life. Now, maybe Maybe my future will include marriage to the church or an opposite-sex spouse as a result of the pursuit of holy relationship, holy, chaste relationship. And maybe it won't, but the point is that I understand and trust that the Lord has been with me all through this, and that love of His is there, and that if you truly do strive to surrender, it can blast you out of any box that you might ever find yourself in. So I'll stop right there, and thank you guys for listening.